Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the desert heat at 6 a.m., where you're about to spend long, physically exhausting shifts hauling massive stone blocks up a ramp that gets steeper every day. Your breakfast? 10 loaves of bread so hard they could double as building materials, washed down with beer that tastes like it was brewed in a construction site. And this isn't a one-day team-building exercise. This is your life for the next 2 decades. This grueling work was among the best-paid labor available, which tells you everything about your other options. Let me explain why your modern complaints about Monday mornings are absolutely adorable. But before you get really comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you are enjoying what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you over there. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your alarm clock is the sun rising over the desert, and your breakfast menu hasn't changed in 4,000 years. Congratulations, you've just experienced the most consistent dining experience in human history. The ancient Egyptians really understood the concept of brand loyalty, except their brand was nutritional survival disguised as food. Your morning feast consists of 10 loaves of bread that have the texture of dense, coarse grain, paired with beer that was often gritty, brewed in open-air kilns, making it far less palatable than modern beer. This isn't just breakfast. This is your luxury meal of the day, and spoiler alert, it gets worse from here. The bread production process reads like an ancient manual for making edible bricks. Workers ground wheat and barley using stone querns, which was basically like asking your teeth to do CrossFit every morning. The resulting flour got mixed into dough and baked in heavy ceramic molds called bedja, sometimes weighing up to 12 kilograms when full. Your morning bread was literally forged in fire, which explains why it had the structural integrity of a small building. Your morning beverage situation was equally charming. The beer wasn't for enjoyment. It was liquid calories, designed to fuel your body like a construction machine. You consumed 4 to 5 liters of this nutritional necessity daily, spread over the workday in 2 or 3 beer rations. This beer provided essential carbohydrates, B vitamins, and calories in the desert heat, essentially turning you into a human-powered excavator that ran on fermented grain. The worst part? This gritty, warm beverage tasted like someone had decided to make a drink using the same ingredients they used for mortar. Your daily caloric intake exceeded 3,000 calories, which sounds impressive until you realize it came with zero variety or flavor. Modern people complain about eating the same lunch twice in a week, but you're looking at the same meal for potentially decades. The menu occasionally featured meat. Workers regularly ate beef, mutton, goat, duck, and fish, evidenced by approximately 200,000 bone fragments found at Giza, which sounds luxurious until you remember that this luxury came with a side of backbreaking labor that would make modern construction workers weep. The communal eating experience redefined the concept of personal space. Thousands of workers gathered in overcrowded conditions, creating a dining atmosphere that combined the charm of a prison cafeteria with the hygiene standards of a medieval barn. Complaining about the menu wasn't an option when you're free labor, and the concept of dietary preferences hadn't been invented yet. You ate what was provided, when it was provided, surrounded by thousands of other workers who were equally thrilled about their culinary situation. This breakfast ritual represented your only moment of luxury before the real work began. The ancient Egyptians had turned meal preparation into an assembly line operation, with multiple bakeries operating as household-scale units replicated across the construction site. They understood that feeding thousands of workers required industrial-level food production, creating what was essentially the world's first mass catering operation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. You were consuming food produced with the same organizational efficiency that built the pyramids, except the pyramids were designed to last forever, while your breakfast was designed to disappear as quickly as possible. Now that you've enjoyed this feast of dense bread and warm beer, it's time to meet your new best friends. You're about to become intimately familiar with 2.5-ton limestone blocks that need to travel up increasingly steep ramps, and your relationship with these stone companions will be more intense than any modern dating app could ever facilitate. Welcome to the ancient Egyptian equivalent of CrossFit, except instead of lifting weights for an hour, you're moving mountains for decades, and the only thing getting swole is your collection of permanent injuries. Your job description reads like a physics problem designed by someone who really hated physics students. The physical reality of moving massive stone blocks using only rope, wooden levers, and human muscle makes modern construction equipment look like cheating. You and your 19 closest friends get assigned to each block because apparently the ancient Egyptians invented teamwork and then immediately weaponized it against human comfort. Your toolkit consists of copper chisels that work great on limestone but struggle with harder stones, plus dolerite pounding stones that are basically fancy rocks designed to make other rocks slightly less rocky. It's like being handed a butter knife and asked to perform surgery, except the patient weighs 5,000 pounds and doesn't want to cooperate. Here's where things get mathematically insulting. You need to place one block every 2 minutes, 270 blocks per day, for 23 years straight. That's 2.3 million blocks total, creating a structure that weighs 5.75 million tons. Modern project managers would take one look at this timeline and immediately update their LinkedIn profiles. But you're committed to this construction project whether you like it or not. The ancient Egyptians had turned monument building into an assembly line operation that would make Henry Ford weep with admiration and terror. Team coordination required 20 men per block working in perfect synchronization with no room for error, because apparently ancient Egypt invented precision manufacturing using only human parts. Your crew of 2,000 workers got subdivided into named gangs of about 1,000 workers each, fostering the kind of workplace competition that modern HR departments would classify as deeply concerning. These gangs were further divided into files of roughly 200 workers, then split into divisions of about 20 workers for specific tasks, creating a management structure more complex than most modern corporations. The ramp system got steeper and more dangerous as the pyramid grew taller, which is basically the construction equivalent of a video game that gets progressively harder, except you can't respawn when you die. Archaeological evidence supports the use of ramps, though the exact type remains a mystery, probably because the people who designed them were too busy not dying to leave detailed blueprints. The most accepted theory suggests a combination of external ramps for lower levels and internal ramps for upper portions, which sounds like someone decided to make construction even more unnecessarily complicated. The physical toll on your body accumulates daily like a very aggressive savings account for pain. Your hands develop rope burns that never properly heal, your muscles strain under constant pressure, and your joints start collecting damage like a car that's been driven exclusively on construction sites. The skeletal remains of pyramid builders reveal osteophytes, which are abnormal bony outgrowths caused by chronic heavy labor, plus spinal damage, including compressed vertebrae and damaged lower spinal sections. Arthritis becomes your constant companion, along with general wear and tear that makes modern office workers' complaints about carpal tunnel seem adorable. The mathematical impossibility of this task from a modern perspective creates a special kind of psychological torture. You're essentially trying to move a mountain using the technological equivalent of really determined optimism and excellent teamwork. The consequences of mistakes include crushed limbs, cave-ins, and blocks rolling backward down ramps, which is the ancient Egyptian equivalent of, oops, there goes the quarterly budget. Your body becomes a precision instrument designed for one purpose, moving stone until it breaks. The ancient Egyptians had figured out how to turn human beings into construction equipment, except construction equipment gets regular maintenance and eventually gets replaced. The Diary of Mirror, logbooks from over 4,500 years ago, meticulously documented the transport of white limestone by boat from the Tyre quarries to Giza, proving that even the paperwork was more durable than the workers. This constant physical punishment doesn't just end when the workday stops. After 10 hours of manual labor, you get to retreat to your private suite, shared with 1,999 other sweaty, exhausted men who smell like they've been wrestling limestone blocks all day. Welcome to ancient Egypt's version of luxury accommodations, where personal space is a concept that won't be invented for another few thousand years. Your dormitory experience redefines intimacy in ways that would make modern college students weep with nostalgia for their cramped dorm rooms. The worker barracks were overcrowded dormitory-style buildings that could accommodate between 1,600 and 2,000 workers at a time, creating a living situation that combined the charm of a prison with the privacy of a fishbowl. These architectural marvels were organized into units of about 40 workers each, because apparently someone decided that 40 was the perfect number for maximum discomfort without quite reaching the point of revolution. Think shared bakeries, dining areas, and sleeping platforms arranged in long galleries, creating a communal living experience that makes modern open-plan offices look like sanctuaries of solitude. Privacy is a foreign concept when you're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers who snore in languages you don't recognize and dream loudly about the blocks they moved earlier. Your sleeping arrangements consist of hard surfaces with minimal bedding because the ancient Egyptians believed that comfort was for pharaohs and mattresses were for people who didn't need to build monuments. Desert temperature extremes mean you're either shivering through cold nights or sweating through heat that turns your sleeping area into a human oven set to uncomfortably warm. The sensory assault begins the moment you enter your luxurious accommodations. The smell of 2,000 unwashed bodies mingles with the complete lack of ventilation to create an aromatic experience that would make modern air freshener companies rich beyond their wildest dreams. Your roommates contribute a symphony of snoring, coughing, and various bodily functions that creates the kind of white noise that modern sleep apps could never replicate. The archaeological site of Hayt el Ghurab, known as the lost city of the pyramid builders, provides valuable insights into these daily living conditions, proving that even 4,500 years later, we're still fascinated by how uncomfortable people can make themselves in the name of construction. The bathroom facilities consist of communal trenches shared by hundreds of workers with zero privacy or hygiene standards because apparently ancient Egypt invented public restrooms and immediately decided to make them as unpleasant as possible. Sanitation facilities were rudimentary at best, contributing to the spread of disease and crowded living conditions that would make modern health inspectors faint. The pyramid settlements were equipped with basic infrastructure including paved streets and drainage systems to manage occasional desert rains, but these amenities were designed more for structural integrity than human comfort. Disease spreads rapidly in overcrowded conditions with no medical understanding of sanitation, turning your dormitory into a petri dish for illnesses that modern medicine would cure with basic antibiotics. The close quarters living arrangement was a necessity for accommodating the massive workforce, but it also created perfect conditions for whatever plague was currently making the rounds. Your immune system gets a workout that would make modern fitness enthusiasts jealous, except instead of building muscle, you're building resistance to dysentery. The impossibility of rest and recovery in these conditions creates a special kind of exhaustion that goes beyond physical tiredness. Your body desperately needs sleep to repair itself from the day's limestone-moving activities, but your living situation provides about as much restorative rest as a construction site during peak hours. The constant noise, smell, and lack of personal space turns sleep into a competitive sport, where the winner is whoever can lose consciousness despite the sensory chaos. Your home is designed for maximum efficiency, not human comfort or dignity, because the ancient Egyptians had mastered the art of treating people like construction equipment that needed basic shelter. The permanent workforce enjoyed more comfortable housing with private domestic spaces and rear courtyards. But as temporary seasonal labor, your accommodations reflect your disposable status in this grand construction project. This living situation affects your mental state in ways that make the physical demands of pyramid building seem almost relaxing by comparison. The medical facilities consist of skilled physicians stationed on site, equipped with copper scalpels and basic surgical tools that would make modern medical professionals question their career choices. Archaeological evidence reveals that these physicians could properly set broken bones and perform amputations, with skeletal remains showing signs of healing that indicate state-supported medical care actually existed. Your healthcare team includes designated physicians and assistants, all members of the workforce, who had access to medical supplies and treatment protocols that combined practical knowledge with religious intervention. When you inevitably injure yourself moving granite blocks, your medical care involves copper tools for surgery, no anesthesia, and limited understanding of anatomy that makes modern veterinary care look sophisticated. Your surgical instruments consist of copper knives and wooden tools that serve their purpose, though the experience combines the excitement of necessary medical intervention with the comfort level of ancient Egyptian precision. The absence of anesthesia means every procedure becomes a test of your pain tolerance and your faith in divine protection. Workplace injuries are guaranteed when you're moving multi-ton blocks for decades. Analysis of skeletal remains reveals osteophytes, which are abnormal bone growths caused by constant heavy lifting, plus compressed vertebrae and damage to lower spinal sections that create permanent reminders of your construction career. Common injuries include arthritis and spinal damage that accumulate over years of repetitive labor, creating a medical portfolio that documents every stone you've ever moved. Evidence from skeletal remains shows severe traumatic injuries, including severed limbs and splintered feet, proving that ancient Egyptian construction sites operated with the same level of inherent danger as modern construction, except without safety regulations or liability insurance. Your body accumulates damage systematically, with each day adding to a collection of aches and pains that become your constant companions. Your average lifespan of 30 to 35 years means you're living on borrowed time from the moment you start working, compared to the nobility who often live to 50 or 60 years old. This shortened lifespan results directly from brutal labor, frequent injuries, and harsh conditions that make survival itself an achievement. The skeletal evidence shows healed injuries alongside fatal ones, indicating that medical care could be effective when you survived the initial trauma. Your healthcare plan includes paid sick leave, which sounds progressive until you realize that most treatments involve crossing your fingers and hoping for divine intervention. The physicians work with the medical knowledge available, combining practical bone-setting techniques with herbal remedies and religious rituals that represent the cutting edge of ancient Egyptian medicine. Your body is viewed as essential equipment in service of an eternal monument, creating a healthcare system designed to keep you functional rather than comfortable. The constant physical danger and medical uncertainty create a psychological toll that extends beyond the physical demands of pyramid building. Your mind processes the daily reality that every injury could be your last, while your body continues the relentless work regardless of pain or discomfort. This combination of physical exhaustion and medical anxiety creates a mental state that makes even your limited downtime feel like a luxury you can barely afford. After work, your entertainment options include staring at sand, talking to exhausted co-workers, or contemplating the meaninglessness of existence while your body recovers from moving limestone blocks that weigh more than modern cars. Welcome to ancient Egypt's version of Netflix, where the only streaming service is the Nile, and the only content is whatever your imagination can produce after 10 hours of manual labor. Your world was the pyramid site, and your only companions were the other workers, bound together by the shared hardship of building monuments to someone else's immortality. The complete absence of entertainment, communication, or mental stimulation creates a psychological desert that makes the actual Sahara look like a theme park. No podcasts, no music, no social media to distract you from the day's backbreaking work. Your smartphone is a rock, your television is the sunset, and your internet connection is whatever gossip travels through the worker barracks at the speed of exhausted whispers. The ancient Egyptians had invented boredom and then weaponized it against human sanity by combining it with physical exhaustion that would make modern athletes weep. Boredom becomes a form of psychological torture when combined with physical exhaustion, creating a mental state that makes modern people's complaints about being bored seem absolutely adorable. Your brain desperately craves stimulation, but your body is too tired to do anything about it. This creates a special kind of restlessness that feels like being trapped in a library where all the books are written in a language you don't understand, and the subject is how to move heavy things without dying. The social hierarchy determines who you can speak to and what you can discuss, because apparently ancient Egypt invented workplace politics and then made them even more depressing. Your conversation partners are limited by your rank in the construction crew, and discussing anything beyond work-related topics might be considered inappropriate or dangerous. The pyramid builders developed their own social structure with named work gangs like Friends of Khufu, Drunkards of Menkaure, and Vigorous Gang, which sounds like ancient Egyptian team names chosen by people who really understood the power of workplace motivation through creative branding. The monotony of identical days stretching into decades with no variation or excitement creates a psychological Groundhog Day that makes modern office work look like a thrilling adventure. Every sunrise brings the same routine, the same tasks, the same people, and the same crushing realization that tomorrow will be exactly the same. Your calendar is measured in blocks moved rather than days passed, and your only seasonal variation is whether you're sweating or freezing while performing the same repetitive tasks. News travels slowly and unreliably, leaving you isolated from the outside world like a desert island where the only castaways are thousands of other people who are equally cut off from civilization. Information moves at the speed of foot traffic, and by the time news reaches you, it's probably outdated, distorted, or completely fictional. Your newsfeed consists of rumors passed between workers during meal breaks, creating an information network that makes modern fake news look like professional journalism. The mental toll of repetitive labor with no intellectual stimulation turns your mind into a construction tool designed for one purpose: thinking about moving blocks. Your cognitive abilities become as specialized as your physical skills, creating a mental landscape that's about as varied as the desert horizon. The psychological impact of decades spent performing the same tasks creates a form of intellectual atrophy that makes modern complaints about boring jobs seem like luxury problems. Workers create their own entertainment through storytelling and crude games, because human creativity finds a way to survive even in the most soul-crushing circumstances. These improvised diversions become lifelines to sanity, offering brief moments of mental escape from the relentless routine. The shared experience of grueling work fosters a sense of camaraderie and group identity, proving that misery loves company, and company makes misery slightly more bearable. Your mind becomes as confined as your body in service to the pyramid construction, creating a psychological prison that matches your physical circumstances. The skills you develop during pyramid construction may be valuable and transferable, potentially providing enhanced economic opportunities after your service, but the mental cost of acquiring these skills raises deeper questions about what freedom actually means when your choices are limited to different forms of servitude. This sense of community, however, exists within a framework that redefines the very concept of freedom itself. You're technically a free man, free to work yourself to death building monuments to someone else's immortality, which means your liberty consists of the right to sacrifice your body for a pharaoh's eternal glory. Your freedom comes with terms and conditions that would make modern employment contracts look like love letters. The concept of corvée labor reveals how voluntary service actually worked in ancient Egypt. Excluding the highest officials, you were obligated to provide periodic labor to the state, especially during the Nile's flood season from July to October. During this time, when agricultural work was impossible, you were conscripted to work on massive projects like the pyramids, limiting your personal autonomy and choices, and making your freedom feel more like a state-mandated obligation. Your legal status as a free Egyptian remained intact, but conscription severely limited your actual choices about how to spend decades of your life. The twisted logic of being free while having no real choices creates a system where your freedom exists within carefully defined boundaries that happen to include decades of pyramid construction. You can choose any color you want as long as it's limestone gray, The ancient Egyptians had perfected the art of making servitude feel like civic duty, turning forced labor into a patriotic privilege that you should be grateful to experience. Social pressure, economic necessity, and religious duty created voluntary participation in a system that made refusing to participate about as optional as breathing. The symbolic importance of pyramid construction was so significant that many workers may have volunteered, viewing their participation as a religious duty and a means of securing their place in the afterlife. Historical inscriptions suggest this sense of religious duty and national pride served as powerful motivators, encouraging participation in the demanding work. Your choice to participate was influenced by factors that made saying no about as practical as choosing to live without water. The contrast between your freedom and the pharaoh's divine right to your labor highlights a social system where some people were born free to rule, while others were born free to serve. Your pharaoh possessed divine authority that justified claiming your labor for eternal monument construction, while your freedom consisted of the right to contribute your body to this cosmic project. The hierarchy was so absolute that questioning it would be like asking gravity to reconsider its career choices. Building the pharaoh's eternal resting place wasn't just construction work. It was spiritual service that connected you to the divine order of the universe. Your participation in this sacred project supposedly secured your own place in the afterlife, turning pyramid construction into the ultimate long-term investment plan where the returns were entirely theoretical. Archaeological evidence from worker cemeteries discovered in 1990 conclusively disproves the myth of slave labor. You weren't foreign slaves, but proud Egyptians participating in a project that would outlast civilizations. Forensic analysis of workers' bones provides definitive proof that pyramid laborers were Egyptians, not from overseas, working for wages or as tax payment until construction was completed. This paradox of freedom, being legally free while practically bound to decades of backbreaking service, underscores the theme of self-sacrifice that defines your entire existence. Your brief life becomes meaningful through permanent architectural achievement. But the deeper question remains, what exactly are you sacrificing everything to create? The answer reveals itself in the ultimate purpose of your suffering. You're not just building a tomb, you're constructing what scholars theorize was a resurrection machine designed to transform a human into a god. Every block you've hauled serves a cosmic function that makes modern space programs look like amateur science fair projects. Your pharaoh isn't just planning to be buried. He's planning to be launched into divine immortality, using architectural precision that requires your body as fuel. The true purpose of pyramids as spiritual transformation devices reveals that you're participating in the construction of cosmic engines designed to facilitate the pharaoh's transformation into a living spirit, ensuring his continued protection of Egypt from chaos even after death. The pyramid shape itself represents the primordial mound from which the Egyptians believed the earth was created, and the descending rays of the sun symbolizing the pharaoh's connection to the divine. You're building a spiritual launching pad that doubles as the world's most expensive religious monument. Every block you've placed serves a cosmic purpose you'll never fully understand, because the ancient Egyptians had figured out how to turn architecture into theology using mathematical precision that would make modern engineers weep with professional admiration. The pyramids were deliberately built on the west bank of the Nile, the side associated with the setting sun and the realm of the dead in Egyptian mythology, creating a geographical positioning system for the afterlife that connects earthly construction to celestial navigation. The astronomical alignments require your suffering to achieve accuracy that makes modern space missions look like rough estimates. Narrow shafts align with important stars. One shaft in the King's Chamber points toward the Polaris region, another toward Orion's belt, which the Egyptians associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife. These precisely aligned passages function as cosmic highways, designed to transport the pharaoh's soul to its divine destination, requiring mathematical accuracy that can only be achieved through the kind of obsessive attention to detail that comes from decades of repetitive manual labor. The pyramid texts, The oldest religious texts known from Egypt reveal the ultimate purpose of these structures and justify your expendable role in this cosmic project. These ancient documents describe the pyramids as giant machines for turning men into gods, which means your decades of manual labor are essentially divine assembly line work. The texts detail the pharaoh's journey through the afterlife, providing a spiritual instruction manual for using the pyramid as a transformation device, making your construction work part of a divine manufacturing process. The contrast between your brief, painful life and the eternal monument you're creating highlights the ultimate irony of pyramid construction. You sacrifice roughly 30 years of physical existence to build something that will outlast human civilization, making your mortality the price of immortality for someone else. Your individual existence becomes a component in a machine designed to grant eternal life to a single person, turning your life into a consumable resource in the manufacturing of divine transformation. The builder's toil created a structure that blended engineering precision with spiritual symbolism, making their sacrifice cosmic in scale. Your suffering enables someone else's immortality by creating the architectural precision needed for divine transformation, achieving something that transcends individual mortality through collective human endurance. These monuments stand as testament to what can be accomplished when thousands of people sacrifice everything for a single, impossible vision. So here we are, 4,500 years later, still staring at these monuments with the same awe that would make their builders laugh if they weren't too busy being dead. 25,000 workers spent decades sacrificing their bodies and lives to create structures that still inspire wonder, which is either the ultimate victory of human achievement or the world's most expensive example of suffering for someone else's ego. These weren't slaves. They were free men who chose to work themselves to death for bread, beer, and the privilege of contributing to immortality. Your modern complaints about difficult work conditions suddenly seem adorable when compared to moving 2.5-ton blocks for 2 decades without machinery, healthcare, or personal space. These workers achieved something remarkable. They became immortal not as individuals, but as the collective force that created humanity's greatest architectural achievement. Their names are forgotten, but their work remains eternal. Hey guys, what if I told you that over 12,000 snails were needed for just a gram of dye? Enough to trim a single garment hem? And that this fabric would cost more than 3 pounds of gold? You're probably thinking, okay, but it must have been worth it, right? Wrong. The workers who made this legendary Tyrian Purple lived in conditions so revolting that even the hardiest laborers would walk off today. Tonight, we're diving into the world of ancient luxury, where the most coveted color in history was created by people who permanently smelled like a fish market hit by a garbage truck. Picture this. You wake up at 4 a.m., and your job description reads like something written by someone who genuinely hates you. Dive into freezing Mediterranean waters to collect thousands of carnivorous sea snails that smell like a fish market's dumpster had a baby with a sewage plant. Welcome to the glamorous world of ancient Tyre's purple fishermen, where your daily routine involves free diving with stone weights into murex beds, risking drowning for creatures that most people would pay good money to avoid. Your morning starts simple enough, wading into shallow waters during low tide, spending hours bent over tide pools like the world's most masochistic beachcomber. Your hands get repeatedly scraped by sharp rocks and barnacles as you pry loose these prized mollusks. Pliny the Elder helpfully noted that muricids were collected directly by hand on exposed rocky coasts, which is ancient Roman for good luck with your back problems. But the real fun begins when you need the big ones hiding in deeper waters. Stone weights, 40-meter dives. One wrong move and you drown. These snails lurked down to 40 meters deep, deeper than most ancient divers dared. The archaeological evidence shows remarkable homogeneity of shell deposits at some sites, suggesting these snails were hand-collected, possibly by divers, which is academic speak for Someone was crazy enough to actually do this. You're not alone in this aquatic nightmare. Other desperate fishermen compete for the best spots, because a good day's catch means the difference between eating and starving. It's like Black Friday shopping, but underwater and with significantly more risk of death by drowning. The irony hits you like a cold wave. You're risking your life for creatures that produce the most expensive substance on Earth, yet you'll never afford even a thread of the final product. The fishermen of Tyre weren't just winging it, though. They developed sophisticated trapping systems that would make modern marine biologists nod with grudging respect. Archaeological evidence from Palencia shows they used smaller shells as bait, encasing them in basket-like traps to lure hungry murex snails. The high frequency of drilled shells with incomplete drill holes provided sound evidence that these smaller snails had been deliberately overexposed to murex predation in traps. Basically, they turned the snail's cannibalistic nature against them, which is either brilliant or deeply disturbing, depending on your perspective. These baited traps hung from floats in deeper waters where the largest specimens lived, requiring you to understand murex behavior patterns, ocean currents, and seasonal variations in snail activity. You're essentially becoming an unwitting marine biologist, except your research methodology involves risking hypothermia, and your laboratory smells like rotting seafood. The traps had to be checked regularly to ensure captured snails remained alive, because dead murex expelled their precious dye before harvest, making this a race against time and decay. Your toolkit includes lead net weights, fishing hooks, pier spatulas for network, and net gauges, all designed for this specialized form of maritime torture. You use small dip nets to capture individual snails in baskets to transport your living cargo, which sounds reasonable until you realize these creatures are predatory and hiding in rocky crevices like underwater serial killers. The smell starts the moment you pull them from the water, and it only gets worse as they sit in your boat, slowly dying and releasing their pungent mucus. You're working from sturdy wooden vessels equipped with anchors made from cut stone and flax nets that require constant maintenance, because apparently, even your equipment wants to make your life more difficult. The seasonal nature of murex activity and the potential for overfishing make this a constant struggle for survival and profit. You face competition from other fishermen, the risk of drowning during dives, exposure to the elements, and the physical strain of work that would make modern labor unions stage an intervention. You've developed sophisticated diving techniques and trap systems, becoming an expert in marine biology through sheer necessity, all while permanently reeking of rotting shellfish. But what happened when those snails finally hit shore? That's where the real horror began. The crushing floor is where those thousands of murex snails meet their grisly fate, and it's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. The dye workshops of Tyre operated like ancient factories of horror, where workers spent their days crushing shells with hammers and tearing out grape-sized glands from writhing snails. Your workplace is essentially a medieval torture chamber, except the victims are mollusks and the torture is for fashion. Each snail had to be cracked open individually because, apparently, ancient technology hadn't progressed to the point of inventing a decent snail-crushing machine. There was no industrial machinery, just human hands, hammers, and the depressing knowledge that 12,000 dead snails might produce 1.4 grams of pure dye, enough for trim on a single garment, according to research. You're basically running a numbers game where the house always wins, and the house is owned by people who will never smell like rotting seafood. You're working in a windowless room because sunlight ruins the extraction process, which means you're spending your days in what amounts to a medieval dungeon surrounded by mountains of broken shells and the constant percussion of crushing hammers. Your coworkers communicate through grunts and gestures because talking requires opening your mouth, and opening your mouth means tasting the air, which is a mistake you only make once. The mucus glands look innocent enough when you first see them. They're clear, colorless little sacs that seem harmless until they hit the air and start their chemical transformation. It's like watching Dr. Jekyll become Mr. Hyde, except Dr. Jekyll was a sea snail, and Mr. Hyde smells like death warmed over. Pliny the Elder noted that it was crucial to extract the gland from a living snail, because when it dies, it spits out this juice, which is ancient Roman for timing is everything when you're harvesting snail mucus. Your hands are permanently stained, cut up from shell fragments, and developing a distinctive purple-black discoloration that marks you as a dye worker for life. You're essentially getting a full-body tattoo that advertises your profession to everyone you meet. The ancient Egyptian papyrus of Anastasi described the dyer's hands as smelling like rotting fish, which is probably the most polite way anyone has ever described this occupational hazard. The worst part? You have to work fast because dead snails produce inferior dye, so you're racing against decomposition while breathing in the stench of thousands of dying mollusks. You're simultaneously competing against time, decay, and your own gag reflex. Modern assembly line workers complain about repetitive stress injuries, but try explaining carpal tunnel syndrome to someone whose job is literally crushing 10,000 snails per day while racing against the clock. Your tools are specifically designed for this maritime nightmare. Stone pounders for crushing shells, metal knives for extracting glands, and ceramic vessels for the fermentation stage. The uniformity of shell deposits found at archaeological sites suggests that workers operated in organized production centers, which is academic speak for "this horror show was professionally managed." The scale of this operation would make modern industrial facilities look quaint. At the Turkish site of Andriake, archaeologists discovered a shell mound containing approximately 300 cubic meters of discarded murex shells, representing an estimated 60 million individual snails. That's 60 million tiny lives sacrificed for fashion, which puts your local fast fashion retailer's environmental impact into perspective. The extraction process required considerable skill and was performed with the precision of a surgeon, except surgeons don't typically work in windowless rooms that smell like a fish market's worst nightmare. By this point, you've witnessed snail massacre on an industrial scale. But the scent was about to hit full force. You think you know what rotting fish smells like? You're adorably naive, because now those extracted snail glands need to ferment in the sun for 3 days straight. The fermentation process was where Tyrian Purple production crossed the line from unpleasant craft into biological warfare against human noses. Picture this: thousands of murex glands mixed with salt, sitting in open vats under the Mediterranean sun, while you stir them regularly and watch them transform from clear to yellow to green to blue like some kind of maritime mood ring from hell. You're monitoring the oxidation process without understanding the chemistry, just knowing that the right color means the difference between valuable dye and expensive failure. It's like being a medieval bartender, except your cocktail is made from rotting sea snails and your customers are Roman emperors who will execute you if you mess up the recipe. The precise duration was crucial because overexposure to sunlight could ruin the entire batch, resulting in a darkened, undesirable color that would make your investment in 10,000 dead snails completely worthless. The smell was so overwhelming that Roman satirist Martial wrote about it, permeating everything, comparing it to sulphurous waters, an amorous goat, and the old shoes of a veteran soldier, which is probably the most poetic way anyone has ever described industrial strength stench. Your clothes, your skin, your hair, even your dreams probably smelled like rotting seafood. You're essentially marinating in eau de decomposition for 3 days straight, which makes modern perfume seem like a basic human right rather than a luxury. The fermentation vats had to be placed downwind from populated areas because the stench could literally drive entire neighborhoods to evacuate. The city of Sidon strategically located their main workshops at Sarepta, 14 kilometers south of the city center, which tells you everything you need to know about how pleasant this process was. It's like ancient urban planning, except instead of worrying about traffic patterns, you're trying to prevent your industrial smell from causing mass migration. Modern air fresheners, perfumes, and scented candles are luxury items these ancient workers couldn't even imagine. They lived in a world where the smell of success was indistinguishable from decay, where prosperity literally stank, and where making a living meant accepting that you would smell like a fish market's dumpster for the rest of your career. The papyrus of Anastasi noted that the hands of the dyer stank like rotting fish, which suggests this wasn't just a work hours problem but a lifestyle choice that followed you home and into your personal relationships. You are stirring these vats with wooden paddles, watching the chemical transformation happen in real time as the clear fluid progresses through its color changes. The addition of salt serves multiple functions. It preserves the organic material, controls bacterial growth, and creates optimal ionic conditions for the enzymatic reactions, though you have no idea about any of this science. You just know that salt plus snail glands plus time equals liquid gold, assuming you don't accidentally ruin it by leaving it in the sun too long. The choice of fermentation vessels affects the final product quality, as different materials allow varying degrees of oxygen exposure, influencing the balance of chemical reactions. You're essentially running a biochemistry lab using pottery and intuition, which is either impressive or terrifying depending on your perspective. The dyer's skill lay in controlling variables they couldn't fully understand to achieve results they couldn't predict with certainty. The final shade of purple was determined by the interplay of different pigment molecules, including indigo, brominated indigo, and indirubin. Though you're managing this complex chemistry through pure trial and error, you're like a medieval scientist, except your laboratory smells like death and your research methodology involves stirring rotting snail parts while trying not to vomit. The 3-day fermentation process was the crucial transformation that turned worthless snail mucus into liquid gold, but at the cost of creating the most offensive industrial smell in human history. You're witnessing alchemy in action, watching base materials transform into something precious, while simultaneously experiencing what can only be described as an assault on your respiratory system. The resulting dye was worth more than most people's annual income, but the production process made working in a medieval sewer seem like a pleasant career alternative. But even after surviving the fermentation, the economics of this industry would make you question everything about ancient civilization. The economics of this industry reveal one of history's most brutal ironies. You're creating the most expensive substance in the ancient world, worth more than gold, more than silver, more than your entire family's lifetime earnings, and you're still starving. The purple dye industry created one of history's most extreme examples of wealth inequality, where workers lived in grinding poverty while producing luxury items for emperors. It's like being a minimum wage worker at a luxury car factory, except the car costs more than a small country, and you'll never even see one parked outside your hovel. Diocletian's 301 AD edict set purple dye at 150,000 denarii, roughly 3 pounds of gold per pound of dyed wool, while the workers who made it couldn't afford bread. To put this in perspective, you're handling materials worth more than most people's houses, yet you can't afford to buy food for your family. You're basically working with liquid treasure while living like a medieval peasant, except medieval peasants probably smelled better. You're part of an economic pyramid where merchants and rulers got rich while you permanently smell like death and live in conditions that would make actual medieval peasants feel superior. The wealth generated by purple dye financed Phoenician expansion, funded temple construction, and supported military forces that protected trade routes. Alexander the Great reportedly discovered 5,000 talents in weight of purple cloth at Susa, demonstrating how purple served as a store of value comparable to precious metals. Meanwhile, you're wondering if you can afford to eat tonight. The seasonal nature of Murex collection meant periods of unemployment, forcing workers to supplement their income with other fishing activities just to survive. You're essentially a freelance contractor in an economy that doesn't understand the concept of job security. When snail season ends, you're back to regular fishing, which is like going from being a poorly paid specialist to being an unemployed specialist. The purple industry operates on nature's schedule, not yours, and nature apparently doesn't care about your rent. Your labor is so specialized and disgusting that you're essentially trapped in the industry because no one else will hire someone who smells like a rotting fish market. The Egyptian papyrus of Anastasi noted that The hands of the dyer stank like rotting fish, which suggests this wasn't just a work hours problem, but a lifestyle choice that followed you everywhere. You're like a medieval IT specialist, except instead of being indispensable, you're unemployable anywhere else due to your permanent aromatic signature. The irony is suffocating. You're handling materials worth more than kingdoms, but you can't afford to wash the smell off your clothes or upgrade your living conditions. Professional dyers, merchants, financiers, and specialized craftsmen all participated in the purple economy, creating entire communities dependent on purple-related commerce. Everyone else is getting rich off your misery while you're stuck in what amounts to an ancient sweatshop that doubles as a biological weapons facility. Modern minimum wage workers earn more relative purchasing power in a day than these ancient craftsmen saw in months of nauseating labor. A modern fast food worker has better working conditions, better pay relative to living costs, and significantly better career mobility than someone producing the most valuable substance in the ancient world. The industry created a secondary market where everyone made money except you. The value was so high that it supported entire economic networks, from fishing boat construction to specialized ceramic production for fermentation vats. You're the foundation of this economic pyramid, and like most foundations, you're underground, invisible, and bearing all the weight while everyone else enjoys the benefits above. The Romans developed sophisticated legal frameworks for regulating purple use, with sumptuary laws dictating who could wear purple and how much. Unauthorized purple use was treated as a serious crime, with penalties including death, which means you're producing something so valuable that wearing it without permission could get you executed. You're creating contraband for emperors while living like a criminal. How did an odor so vile become the height of status? The answer lies in imperial power plays that turned your misery into the ultimate symbol of wealth and divine authority. You've created a color so exclusive that wearing it without permission could get you executed, and so pungent that it announced your wealth from 3 blocks away. Tyrian Purple became the ultimate status symbol precisely because everyone knew how disgusting and expensive it was to produce. The smell was part of the prestige, like driving a luxury car that runs on liquid diamonds and exhaust fumes made of melted gold coins. You're essentially wearing an aromatic advertisement that screams, "I'm so rich I can afford to smell like rotting fish on purpose." Roman sumptuary laws made unauthorized purple use a capital crime, which means fashion police were literally police who could execute you for wearing the wrong color. Think about that for a moment. You could be sentenced to death for having good taste without the proper government authorization. Roman magistrates of high rank were permitted to wear a toga praetexta, a white toga with a Tyrian purple border, while generals celebrating a triumph were granted the even more luxurious toga picta, entirely Tyrian purple with gold thread edging. It's like having different levels of VIP access to a club, except the club is ancient Rome and the bouncer has legal authority to kill you. Byzantine emperors literally had their children born in purple-draped chambers to emphasize divine right, which gave us the phrase, "born to the purple." This practice created a direct connection between royal blood and the blood-red stench of rotting snails, because apparently nothing says divine authority quite like surrounding your newborn with fabric that smells like a fish market's dumpster. You're witnessing the birth of a future emperor in a room that probably violated every modern health code imaginable, all in the name of establishing legitimacy through interior decorating. By the 4th century AD, the exclusivity of Tyrian purple in the Roman Empire reached its peak, with sumptuary laws restricting its use to the emperor alone. The color became a metonym for the office of emperor, with phrases like "donned the purple," signifying the assumption of imperial power. You realize that wealthy Romans were essentially wearing the concentrated essence of 250,000 dead sea snails, and they considered this the height of sophistication. It's like if modern billionaires competed to see who could wear the most expensive roadkill, except the roadkill cost more than small countries. The color's intensity actually improved with age and wear, meaning that the longer you owned purple garments, the more they advertised your wealth and power. This unique characteristic made purple clothing appreciate in value over time, like a fine wine that happens to be made from rotting sea creatures. You're essentially wearing an investment portfolio that doubles as a biological weapon against anyone with a functioning nose. The older your purple clothes got, the more they proved you'd been rich long enough to afford multiple rounds of this olfactory torture. Purple also acquired religious significance, associated with piety and divine authority, which means priests were literally wrapping themselves in the smell of decay to demonstrate holiness. The Byzantine Empire continued the Roman tradition of associating purple with imperial authority, tightly controlling its production and use while the imperial court subsidized its production, reserving it for coloring imperial silks and other items associated with the ruling class. Religious figures incorporated the color into their vestments, creating a theological connection between spiritual authority and the stench of decomposing mollusks. It's like establishing a direct line to God through the medium of rotting seafood. Modern luxury brands spend millions on marketing exclusivity, but ancient purple was self-advertising because the stench alone proved you could afford the impossible. You didn't need logos or brand recognition when your clothes announced your wealth through biological warfare against everyone's respiratory system. The production process was so revolting that wearing purple was like carrying around a certificate of authenticity that proved you were rich enough to afford something that disgusted everyone around you, including yourself. The revolting production process wasn't a bug in the system, it was a feature that made purple even more valuable as a display of wealth and power. The fact that creating purple dye required diving for carnivorous snails, crushing them while they were still alive, and fermenting their glands in the sun for 3 days wasn't an unfortunate side effect. It was the entire point. You're wearing proof that you're so wealthy you can afford to torture sea creatures for fashion, which apparently passed for sophistication in the ancient world. This entire industry reveals something profound about human nature and the hidden costs of luxury. The more disgusting and difficult something was to produce, the more valuable it became as a status symbol. You're looking at an economic system where misery literally created value, and where the worst-smelling job in the ancient world produced the most coveted luxury item. The next time you complain about your job, remember the purple fishermen of Tyre, who risked drowning, lived in permanent stench, and created liquid gold while remaining desperately poor. Your worst Monday morning doesn't compare to diving for carnivorous snails at 4 a.m. while praying you don't become fish food yourself. These workers spent their careers marinating in eau de decomposition so Roman emperors could advertise their wealth through biological warfare against everyone's nostrils. Their story reveals that luxury has always depended on hidden networks of human misery, and that our modern comforts exist because we've figured out how to make things without torturing our noses. We've invented synthetic dyes, air conditioning, and industrial processes that don't require 3 days of fermentation in the sun. So appreciate your air fresheners, your clean clothes, and your ability to smell like something other than rotting fish, because somewhere in ancient history, people sacrificed their dignity so emperors could smell like death and call it divine.